What's going on, gang, and welcome back to another episode of Scared of Normal. I'm Mike Murphy, and today we're in beautiful Austin, Texas, on location here at Empire BMX in the 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙈 office. This place is so freaking cool, and today's guest has been in the BMX world for a long time, quietly designing some of your favorite things from posters to bike frames, and has recently founded 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙈. We're stoked to welcome Adam Roye to Scared of Normal.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude, this is going to be so much fun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of your stuff for a long time without knowing that you were the one behind it up until, I guess it was probably like when you guys launched 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙈.
Hell yeah.
And I really started like digging into it, and I was like, dude, this is crazy that you've like designed like my favorite stuff throughout BMX. So this one's like a really special one for me. So I'm so excited to be doing this, dude.
Thanks, dude. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So for the people who don't know who you are, how would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself?
But before that, we'd like to take a moment to thank our friends over at 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙈 for allowing us to make this episode happen. At Traction, we're very fond of 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍 and all the dope things that they have going on. In fact, just last year, we were fortunate enough to be able to put together a collection with them that was called Roasted. And to date, it's still one of my most favorite collaborations that we've been fortunate enough to do. Based in Austin, Texas, 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍 thoughtfully designs and creates entertaining products with collections containing various curated items, from graphic t-shirts to off-the-wall novelty pencil sharpeners. In fact, today I'm rocking one of their hoodies, and I'm not gonna lie, it is like -10 degrees here in Colorado right now, and I'm staying nice and warm, and I am comfy as hell. So do yourself a favor and go pick up some gear from 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍's recent winter drop by visiting the link in this episode's description or by going to www.𝙎𝘼𝘍.co. Thanks again to 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍 for the love, and now back to the episode.
I work for Empire BMX. I've been doing graphics for them since early 2000s or so about 20 years.
Dang. So almost since the beginning.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I guess they are 20 years they're going to be 20 years this year. So basically since about the beginning.
Wow.
And then at the same time I was doing a zine called 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝑍, and then that turned into the bike company, and I did that for a while. And then we started 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍, and so now I'm doing 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝘍 and Empire, but I just do graphic design, creative direction, and that kind of stuff.
Heck yeah, man. I love it. So I would like to really figure out kind of like where you grew up.
I was born in 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝑍, Texas, and then my parents moved to Austin suburbs when I was 2, and so I've been grew up in North Austin, and then lived in West Austin for a little bit, and then I'm on the east side now, so pretty much born and raised, but not exactly, pretty close.
Changed a little bit since then, I would assume.
Yeah, for sure.
How do you feel about all the change?
I don't mind it. It's cool. I mean, change is inevitable. I think, of course, there's downsides, but I mean, the Austin that I know growing up was a change from the people that were there 30 years before I was. So, I mean, it's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
Great perspective to have. Yeah, that's awesome. What's a like great childhood memory you have from back then?
So I was looking at Instagram or social media or something yesterday, and I saw a kid posted a video of himself riding some jumps in North Austin and Cedar Park, where I grew up. And it actually is where I learned to ride when I was 13. There's a huge field behind our house, and there was this big park, and they stored all of the supplies for the park, like big piles of dirt and mulch. And so myself and a couple of my friends sort of turned it into some jumps. And I come to find out, and this was in 98 probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I went back to my parents' house where I grew up, and I went back there, and they had actually turned it into like full-on jumps.
No way.
Yeah,
so it's like a sanctioned bike park now.
Yeah, totally.
Dude.
And so that was my first memory of riding, was being there and like jumping, and it's pretty cool to see. Like, and now I'm seeing kids on Instagram riding there. Dang,
that's bizarre, dude. Yeah. That is really crazy. It's cool, like, to see how far that stuff has come, because like when you're a kid, it's probably like, yo, we can't get caught out here because like these things will get plowed.
Sure,
and now it's like, hey, like we need to do something nice for the community. Let's build a bike park.
Yeah.
Like how crazy is that progression?
It's really awesome.
It's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
So what came first for you? Was it BMX or art, or was it kind of like at the same time?
Art has been a part of my life forever. And so even growing up, I would, before I could ride a bike, I would draw and paint. And my mom is a super creative and sort of like a craft oriented person, and is always was in tune with like teaching me about art and stuff. And so that probably came first. And then when I was 13, I started riding, and kind of assume, like, you know, when I was 15 or 16, I think I made my first sticker for Trend Bike Source, which was the big shop in Austin before Empire. So they went hand in hand from an early. I mean, stickers were one of my favorite parts about BMX. Like early on, was just collecting stickers and stuff like that. So,
do you still have any of those original stickers?
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see it after this. That's so cool.
Yeah, I have a huge sticker box for
That's
sure.
so cool, man. Wow, that's super cool. 15 years old designing stickers, man.
It was a 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙬 ripoff, so
that's badass.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, dude. So like from a young age, like obviously being in Austin where there were so many iconic BMX riders, who were some of your inspirations, whether it be like a BMX rider or somebody in the art world?
𝙎𝘾 𝙍𝙀 was definitely, for I think most people in the industry at the time, was very influential, but in Austin especially. And yeah, I gravitated towards their graphics very heavily. FBM was one of our favorite companies, me and my friends growing up. Yeah, and then, I mean, even like 𝙎𝘾𝘍𝙬, like I said, like that was something that I just recognized as like bold and didn't know what it was, and I thought that was like a cool thing. I can remember like my neighbors having, like, the kid that lived next door having like an old Prius that was covered in bumper stickers, and some of them being skateboarding. And I don't even remember what they were, but I just remember that sticking with me. Yeah.
That's super cool. I mean, your work has always stood out to me as like so kind of like counterculture, and I don't know if edgy is the right word, but just kind of like a middle finger to like, it is what it is, you know? So like, it's cool to hear those ties back to those brands that were like going against the grain and just kind of being a little more like, I don't know if it's abrasive, but just like, hey, we're doing what we do, and if you don't think that's cool, then like move along. This isn't for you. So that's super cool to hear those ties back. Hearing that you were like relating to the art for T1. Who was doing that art?
Joe and Taj. I think Taj was helping a lot, and then Dave Vandermoss was a guy who was involved early on. I actually have some of his paintings over there in the corner.
Sick.
But yeah, Dave Vandermoss was a guy, and I think Taj was doing a lot of stuff also.
Heck yeah.
I'm not totally sure, but yeah, something like that.
So those dudes like are obviously super influential in the art space in BMX too. Like, so were you, you know, linking up with those guys and talking about art stuff, or were you just kind of looking at the stuff that they were working on?
Yeah. I mean, like Joe, who is my work neighbor, he's literally right next door, but he was like, I mean, when we were kids, he was always super nice. But we were kids, you know, so, you know, when you're 15, it's hard to like go up to someone that's like your hero that you're intimidated by and be like, let's talk about art, you know? So, for me, I've always been an observer. I spend a lot of time just like, if there's a magazine ad, I look at every single inch of it. I look at if there's a little copy in the bottom that says like, this photo is by Sandy Carson. I'm like, who is that? And then I, you know, try to figure out who that is and like look into his work. And so I've always been sort of a self-investigator, I think. I don't talk to a whole lot of people, honestly, in general. But yeah.
I like that though. Like, I feel like that's a thing in BMX, or just kind of throughout everything, is that people aren't looking at who is creating what they're consuming.
Yeah.
And that's something for me personally that's always driven me so crazy, because it's like, anything that you enjoy, it's like, shouldn't you like figure out why you enjoy it? And because you can find more things that are in that same vein if you know who the creator is.
Sure.
You know, like
Yeah.
I was talking to Vish, like, you know, Vish films for Cult, and he's like, I was telling him like, dude, I love your work, and like you can always tell it's something that you're working on because of it's your style.
Sure.
And he's like, yeah, I just feel like not a lot of people are looking at who's filming videos, and it's probably the same for you, you know, with art and art direction. It's like nobody's really digging past like, oh, that's a cool design. And so the fact that from a young age you were looking at that, is that something that like bothers you when kids are kind of overlooking like the creator?
No, it doesn't bother me. I became that way because I grew up with a really strict mom who, if I wanted to wear a t-shirt, I had to be able to explain what was on it to her. So that's been ingrained in me from a really young age to be able to talk about the things around me and explain and have a grasp on them well enough that I can feel comfortable, you know, putting it on my body and understanding what's behind it. So, no, it doesn't bother me, but what I like is what you're saying. The kids that do tap into that, those are the kids that I really appreciate and I connect with more so. And so the people that aren't in tune with that, that's most people, and that's fine and normal. But the kids that do tap into that, that's the people that I connect with generally the most. So I sort of appreciate people that do have that mentality.
Kind of going the extra mile.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So talking about doing like your first sticker design project at 15 years old, where does it go from there?
So I think I did a couple shirts for Empire. Maybe like there's like the Eazy-E shirt I did that was pretty popular. And then Chase Hawk, Aaron Ross both got me jobs separately doing their frame graphics. Chase was writing for Fit at the time, and Aaron was writing for FBM. And so that was how I sort of got my feet wet, working for BMX brands outside of just like Empire, Tina and Tom.
Just kind of the local stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What age were you when you were doing that stuff?
Probably 18 or 19, somewhere in there.
Okay, so just kind of graduated high school.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What were you doing for work outside of that, or were you just doing, you know, the design work?
I was working for Empire. I quit to move to San Francisco. That fell apart in like a week. So I came back home and I had lost my job at Empire because they'd given it to someone else, which is like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. So I ended up working construction for a little while, and then I worked at Zoomies in the mall at the skate shop, which was terrible. And then eventually I was able to get my job back at Empire. And once I got my job back, I worked retail for a long time and did graphic design sort of a couple days a week. And then eventually got to the point where I was like, I can't work retail anymore. I'm not built for this.
Yeah.
And they slowly graduated me into just being like fully behind the scenes doing design and brand management stuff.
That's freaking cool. Did you do like the typeface work for Empire as well?
No, that was Caleb Everett and I. Caleb helmed it, and I kind of gave him my feedback, and Tina and Tom gave them their feedback. But Caleb, who now does Land Boys, which is a pretty big graphic design firm, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure.
like agency type.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
It's always, Empire's always stood out to me as one of those like bike brands that has been so art directed. And again, like from a young age, I never understood why. And like, because I was that kid who was just like looking at it, oh, that's cool, but never digging into why. And like I said, at the beginning of COVID, I like started understanding a little bit more and more. I'm like, oh, now I understand why I like all of this stuff. So you move out to San Francisco. Were you going out there for work? Were you going out there for school?
I was going to just move there and maybe go to like a community college, but I just wanted to get out of Austin. And I had made some friends, and they were there, and I thought I could just kind of go there very naively and make it happen. And my truck got broken into, and all my stuff got stolen. And then I had a room in a house promised for me that fell through. So I paid a deposit, and I don't know, it was a fiasco. I was just a young, naive 18-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever.
Thinking you're going to move halfway across country and it was just going to be all peaches.
Sure, yeah.
But that's how it goes sometimes.
It was a good lesson, honestly.
Heck yeah. So in those younger years, like where were you finding inspiration for art?
It's hard to recall, to be honest with you. I've always been into like zines. I've collected zines for a long time. Stickers, like in general, like bumper stickers. I don't know. There's like a certain aesthetic that just appeals to me that I've like, it's not necessarily one single thing, but it's more of a single style that I feel myself gravitating towards. And that can kind of come from really anywhere in a way.
So talking about like, you know, you do have such a unique style and it's kind of off the wall compared to most people's stuff. Have you been like met with criticism when it comes to your style? Like have people,
Sure,
what's like an insult that you've received that you're like, that's actually a compliment? Does there any stick out to you?
Whenever Cult first came out, the logo was a point of contention. That's when the mess, like I guess it was the 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙍𝙬 BMX was like kind of a free for all as far as commenting. So there was just like open anonymous commenters and that sort of thing. And it was a contentious breakup that caused Cult. So when the brand first launched, there was just a plethora of like, this logo is terrible comments, which I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. But yeah, in the Cult 5-year anniversary book, we republished all of them, which was fun.
I remember that actually.
Yeah.
And I remember like when that happened because it was like, you know, the breakaway from Fit Bike Company and like people were, I remember some of the comments because everybody was like, the U looks like a V. Like, what does this mean? Like, it's so funny, man.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nobody says anything. So
honestly, like at this point in time, I feel like it is one of the most iconic logos in BMX. But it's super funny because I have a friend who he's like one of the most awarded advertisers in history, and he's a graphic designer as well. And he's super into BMX. He's like almost 60 years old. And he's like, what's up with this brand that's CVLT? And I was just like, dude. And now, like, you know, this is as he's like starting to get back into BMX and asking what frames are cool. And he's like, always like, that's, to me now, that's the coolest logo. So it's like so funny. I always come full circle on it. But like, yeah, it made me laugh because it just took me back to those moments. Like, what was that, 2010, 2009?
I think so, yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Was that like a pretty crazy, like turbulent time as that breakup was happening? Or were you kind of like removed from the mix of that?
Yeah, I wasn't involved at all in the S&M or Fit and Cult break thing. I was way more behind the scenes. Yeah, it was, we all, when it was happening, it was sort of happening behind the scenes where not everyone at Fit knew what was going on, is my understanding. And we all, the new Cult team, the guys who were going to break away from Fit, all met up in Las Vegas, sort of on like a secret, like this is our first meetup type of a deal. And I was brought out for that, and I can remember, like Chase showed up, and I think he won the Nora Cup, and he was wearing a Cincinnati Reds hat that we had embroidered like CULT after the C, and I think the people at Fit sort of figured out what was happening, and so that there was some people there. They were, each side was sort of picking at each other.
Yeah,
it seemed like
just like pushing each other's buttons.
Trying
a little bit.
to, yeah. I mean, again, I was, you know, I can't remember how old. I was young still, so I was definitely behind the scenes and not privy to like a lot of what was going on between like the
butting of the heads. Yeah. Before that, you were saying that like this is probably years before, but you designed stuff for, you know, Chase and Aaron's frames. Did you do Aaron Ross's the Stairmaster? Is that the frame that you did?
Yeah.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like again, it's one of those things for me. Like looking back at that, like I had a friend who had that frame, and we were all like, that thing is so cool, and like losing our minds. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
After those two frames, like, did you do more frame projects? Were more brands looking at the work that you were doing, reaching out? Or were you kind of just saying, like, I want to work with just my friends or the people that I have direct relationships with? How did that process work?
It ended up being kind of both. Being in Austin, it's like friends with Joe and Gaz at Mutiny Bikes, and so they ended up asking me to do some stuff for them. And then I did, knowing some of the guys at Kink. I think I lived with Sean Sexton at the time and helped him with some graphics. So it continued on to other brands, but it was generally just through friends.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's basically both of what you're saying.
Yeah, I really like that approach to things too, where it's like a relationship based, because you're not getting like the fluff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, hey, I know you, I know
Yep.
what kind of person you are. We can talk about the graphics, and then next thing you know, you're spitting out something that's like true to who they are, as opposed to when, you know, some random company hits you up and they're just like, hey, we need something that looks really cool.
Yeah, and
You're just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that person that I'm designing the frame for, or whatever it is. And it turns into something that's just kind of like meh.
Yeah.
You know, like I think that's a really cool way to approach scenarios, is when it's like very soulful, you know, like you're putting a lot of like soul into it. So
It makes a more genuine product, I think.
yeah.
Which is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think that's like, you know, BMX should be really focused on those kind of things. All industries should,
Sure.
in fact, like putting something out that's more genuine than just being like, hey, let's slap some generic logos on this and like we're going to sell a product with your name on it. Like, I don't know about all that, man.
That's kind of why I ended up leaving Colt.
Really?
That's a really great way of saying it, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I'd like to kind of dig into that in
Sure.
a little bit here,
Sure.
but yeah, that have like such a humble and quiet approach to your art, and like you kind of like are very quiet behind the scenes from what I can understand. Like even just like looking for some of the stuff you've done online, like it's just, you're kind of silent about it, which I really love. You let the work speak for itself. Is that something by design? Has that always been your thing, or you just more of like an introverted person who doesn't like to, you know, kind of say, hey, I did that?
Yeah. Yes, to all of what you just said. Yes, I am introverted, I would say. Maybe ambivert or whatever, sort of in the middle, but leaning introvert. And yeah, I mean, there's enough people trying to get credit for stuff on the internet, and I'm sort of averse to what a lot of people are doing. And so if I see a lot of people doing something, I kind of just want to do something different. And I think that was my natural reaction to just seeing so much stuff put on the internet. I was like, I mean, I'm making the shirt, it'll be in the world to exist. I'll just let that.
You can kind of exist in that way without having to say like, yeah, that's a really great way to look at it though.
It feels good to me. I mean, the validation from posting is like chasing a drug, it feels like, in a way. And it just doesn't feel good to me personally. And like just seeing like someone wear my shirt, that feels great. Like that's the best feeling. And that's validation, you know? So
Let's talk about that for a second, because like I remember the first time I was out in public and I saw somebody walk by in a Traction t-shirt, or like when people send me pictures of people wearing our
it's
shirts.
the coolest thing ever, right?
Yeah. Like what was that, the first time you like saw somebody random wearing your shirt? Like, do you remember where that was? Do you remember what you felt?
I still feel the same way. I think it's like pretty crazy. I still sort of like, I mean, I was at like a weird mall recently and there was a kid there who was wearing Burn Slow swim shorts and shirt, and I was just like, I couldn't believe it, honestly. It's
That's
just
so cool.
shocking to me. And I can't remember the first time. One of the weirdest times was when we were in London on a cult trip, and we're driving through, you know, London, the biggest city, one of, if not, I don't know. But, and there's like just a random bloke who had a Colt trucker hat on, who was like clearly not a BMX rider at all. And we like leaned out the window and we're like, yeah, Colt. And he had no idea who we are and just immediately is like double birding us. was just like, that's so cool. We're on the other side of the world or whatever, and
That's bizarre.
this weird guy is wearing a cult hat, and I don't know where he got it. It didn't even look like a hat we had ever made. It was bizarre. It was so cool. It was like just
That's badass. I mean, I'm sure it's kind of in the same vein because like cult has kind of become more of like a pop culture BMX brand. So seeing those celebrities like sitting on bikes or whatever, like does that kind of do the same thing when you see that logo? You're just like, whoa, I made that, and like that dude's like pop culture, like he's huge. Like,
it's crazy for sure.
That's got to be an insane feeling.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So we talked a little bit about like the print zines and stuff like that. Do you know how many you've done at this point in time?
No, I don't. I had a publishing company for a while, like a sort of like a little side project for Colt. It was helping me keep my sanity, something I could like fully keep control of. And so I have no idea. I think we put out 60 or 80 titles somewhere in there, and I probably did half of them, and I've done probably more than that also. So a lot, yeah.
That's awesome. Were you printing them in-house or are you outsourcing that stuff?
Mostly in-house, a little outsourcing here and there, but yeah, mostly in-house.
Heck yeah. So how do you like get inspired to do one of those? Or how is that? What's that process, that workflow kind of look like, if there is one?
There is one. A zine for me is like a collection of things. So I sort of wait until I have the right collection that needs to go on paper. And then I've also used them as like just like an emotional outlet almost, you know, like if I'm angry or I'm sad or I'm going through something, I'll spend a lot of time just sort of pouring it out into a zine and then printing them, and it feels really good to just like look at it and be like, I feel better. It's a process, and it makes me feel better afterwards.
Do you look back at those at any point in time and like remember what you were going through it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that's super cool. I feel that same way sometimes with like music, where like I'll look through what I've like downloaded, and I'm like, oh man, I was going through like a dark time, or I was really excited back then.
Yeah.
So what is it for you about like the print medium? Is there something that like is very special about that to you?
Yes. It is. I'm trying to think of a good way to say that, but it is like almost one of the most simplest things that you can physically make, and create a product. Like you can get scrap paper, you can get markers. You don't even need to staple it. Like you can. There's no rules, and it's the quickest way, I guess, within my world and my wheelhouse and what I know, to just create a product. And there's like nothing cooler to me than like having something that I made and passing it out to my friends and then being like, oh, this is so cool. And it just feels great. It's just, there's something about it that they can morph into any sort of, the size can change physically, the binding can change, it can be black and white, you can print with different style of printers. It's so broad, but it also sort of ends up right in the same place. And again, just having like something cool, small and physical to look at is
something tangible that you can hold. And I like the fact that you talk about like the different weights of paper, like different printing methods, because I feel like that is such a big thing that is overlooked, especially in the digital era.
Sure, yeah.
Like you when you pick something up that has that heavy matte paper, or like, pretty lightweight paper, or it's, printed with heavy ink, like there is that emotion, there is that soul in there. So is that something that you're incorporating in when you're designing these? Like you're thinking about what method you're using to print it? And
sure,
things like
yeah.
that, and like color themes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's all engineered with reason. So the reason will dictate the decisions.
That's awesome. Do you have like a particular issue that you've put out, or like grouping of them that you've put out that are your favorites?
No, I got a risograph printer a few years ago, which is it's just a brand of printer that has its own proprietary sort of print technology.
Okay.
It's sort of a mix between like Xerox and screen printing, and has a unique look, I would say. And I've put out a few zines on that, and those are some of my favorites, I would say.
Heck yeah. What's the most recent one you've put out?
The most recent one I've published it's all of Brett Silva's Photos, and it's a Dig Burn Slow collaborative zine. And I did the layout and sort of helmed the publishing of that. So I didn't technically like I don't know how you say that, but so they're all Brett's photographs. So it's his zine technically.
But you just laid it out.
Sure, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really fun too, because then it brings in like another layer. It's collaborative, you know, and like you get to take somebody else's vision and then kind of make it your own. Did he sit down with you throughout that process, or were you kind of just doing that solo?
I did it solo. I put generally what I do is I'll put a mock-up together and just send it through to who I'm working with and explain kind of the decisions I made and why I made them. And he was, from first copy, he's like, perfect. This is great. Let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you do the collaborative art for his new project here as well?
What is that?
Did you guys do a frame? Is that
Yes.
Brett?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. The Empire Sunday Brett Bluebonnet frame.
Yeah.
Yes, I did those graphics.
That stuff turned out so great. I got one of those shirts the other day here, and I was like geeking out, man. I like took it back to my friends who like don't ride BMX at all. And they were losing their minds because they're like Texas through and through. And they're like, that's our state flower.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that?
That's right.
Like, that's so cool. And like, I do love like that approach. Like your style is like so minimalistic, but it says so much too. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you think that like, obviously you've kind of grown into that style. Like what did that process look like? Was it just like trial and error kind of working through it?
Yeah.
And like,
I would say recognizing what works and what doesn't work. Just again, coming back to the observation stuff, just trial and error, doing something. And then, you know, I'll make a shirt and part of it will be so good. And I'm like, okay, I just need to remember that. And that could be any different thing, the ink color or contrasted the right way on the shirt color or whatever it may be. But yeah, definitely trial and error and just sort of studying what I think works best and what doesn't, and just trying to, again, like let reason dictate where these things go.
Heck yeah. So before we sat down and started doing this, we were talking about like the small details and like how much those like can bug you sometimes. Is there anything that you've put out where you're like looking at it now, like in hindsight and being like, man, I kind of rushed that. I wish I hadn't put that out. Or are you like so like detail oriented that you're not going to put something out that you're not stoked on?
I can come to terms with, I mean, things like when I'm making something, I want it to be perfect. If I put it out and there's something wrong with it, it frustrates me for a little bit. And then at a certain point, I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's kind of part of the process.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times with that type of stuff, you're probably the only one that's even going to notice it.
Yeah.
So that's like, I feel like that's a hard thing probably for most artists to get through that head space of being like, okay, I'm the only one who noticed, and like the next time I can learn from that.
Yep.
So when you're sitting down to do a new zine or design a new t-shirt or a frame, are you a kind of person who likes to work in silence? Do you listen to music?
I work with the TV on, watching shows usually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there any like specific type of show that you like to watch?
I like a show that's an hour-long episode that's got a good amount of seasons and with like not annoying character voices.
Okay.
Because it's like background white noise for me in a way.
And is it the hour so you can like get up and take a break, or?
Part of that, it helps maintain like staying on an hour break. It also, if I'm watching a show with 30 minutes, it just feels, I hate theme songs over and over and over. So it spaces that out. But yeah, I watch so much TV. There's so much TV on while I'm working a lot. That's of times.
Awesome. So what are like your go-tos for that, I guess?
I have a list of something like 20 or 30 shows, and I just cycle through them.
Heck yeah. What's the one you're on right now?
I'm watching Breaking Bad right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think like when you're, working and those are playing, does that help? Like, does that feed into the projects that you're working on?
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll hear a song that's really good and we'll end up using it like in a video. Get lots of songs from watching TV shows. I'll see a shirt that a character is wearing and there'll be something about it that I like that I'll take notes of. But yeah, like when I do my taxes at the end of the year, I definitely write off like all of my streaming and music and stuff, and I explain to my CPA like how I use all of my ideas come from media.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm always so curious on that, just because like some of the shirts you've done are just like so iconic, and it's like I'm always, again, I kind of try and look at people's work and I'm like, where did that come from? You know, where it's like the faces and stuff, or like just even some of the Burn Slow videos you guys have put out, like the soundtracks are so like different and they're so cool. And it's like, okay, why did that come to be? So now hearing that, like it kind of like spells it out a little bit more. You just shared the secret sauce, man.
Not too much.
I love that. So you're like clearly pretty consumed by like working in BMX. Are there any industries outside of BMX that you work within, or like any like musicians or anything like that you like to work with, or is it just like, is BMX like the focus?
They're not really, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I help my friends out with projects all the time that are not BMX related, but yeah, no, it stays pretty much in the BMX wheelhouse. And I wouldn't say that I am at the point in my life where I'm not consuming like every single ounce of every video that's coming out. I couldn't tell you who's on like every team like I could when I was in my 20s or whatever. And for me, it's important not to be so BMX focused all the time. Or I'll start to dislike it in a way, to be honest with you. So I'm interested in lots and lots of different things.
Heck
for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really good, because I think, you know, a problem that happens with any of these types of industries that are so core is people like get into this echo chamber because they're only focused about like, hey, who's doing this and who's doing what. And like, there is a lot of beauty, I think, in like removing yourself from that and being like, okay, the world is very big. And like we sat down with Aaron a couple days ago to do a podcast, and he kind of said the same thing. He's like, I never realized like how big the world was until like I started interacting with like, you know, quote unquote normal people who don't know BMX. And he's like, I didn't understand like how like unrelevant BMX was to like the general person.
Sure.
So when you kind of step back and look at that and be like, okay, like how do we get people to be stoked on Burn Slow stuff for your guys' case that don't ride BMX? You can't be like hyper focused on BMX, and like, you know, you need to eat, so like you want to grow beyond what BMX is. So that's like a cool way, I think, to approach the whole thing.
I like exactly what you're saying. I like pulling influences from outside of the industry, pulling them into bike riding, and then seeing how that can kind of change the industry a little bit, or I mean, it's not in like big ways or anything, but just sort of opening people's minds to not just, it has to be what you're saying, like paying attention to what everyone else is already doing.
Yeah, you don't want to silo it off, you know? And like, I think that's a great way to approach it, because then it creates a ripple effect. You know, like I've had so many friends tell me, like, especially with business, it's like, you want to go deep instead of going wide, because if you go wide and you try and capture everybody, like it's much more difficult to go deep, you know? But right now you guys are going so deep in BMX, and at some point it's going to be easy to go wide, especially with I really think so, with that mindset of you have a purview that's like, the net's very big because you're looking everywhere outside of BMX, and yeah, it's so easy to create that echo chamber. So
it is very easy.
That's awesome to hear. So you touched on it a little bit, but Cult started as a zine. I don't think many people know that. Yeah. And I think that's like a really cool thing. I remember when I found that out, I was like, wow, like that's like a piece of the history, I think, that's like kind of just lost out there. So why did that project start for you?
I was in going to community college, taking graphic design classes, and I just wanted to start working towards a project of my own. I just wanted to get going. Felt like I was doing something rather than just being in school. And so I started a brand. In my eyes, I was like, this is going to be a brand, and I'll see sort of how it morphs and what life it takes on. But it was a zine and a shirt and a poster was the first package that we made. Okay. And then the second one was a shirt and a zine. And it took me like a year between at that time. I was like now I do that in like 2 weeks or whatever. But it was a slow process.
Was it slow because you were just being meticulous about it, or like because you had never really done anything like that before? Or were you just so busy?
It was a little of all of those things, like not knowing what I was doing, not like now I've got my process flows worked out. I've got template files and everything. So I can, and back then I was, still figuring it out, like how to work Photoshop half the time or whatever.
Yeah. It's crazy how much those little shortcuts like save your life.
Oh yeah. So it wasn't necessarily about being meticulous. It was just the learning curve, I think, was a lot of it at that point.
That's awesome. So I'm assuming, like, I remember a few years ago I was rewatching Prop 72, and there was like the house segment with like Aaron and Chase and all those dudes, and Chase is wearing a Colt shirt. But that was years before Colt was a thing, like as a bike company. Was one of those shirts, I'm assuming, probably from that collection.
Yeah, I believe
it was
so,
like a bunch of flags on it.
Yep, that's the one. Yeah, that's the first
That's
Colt
the
shirt
first
ever.
one.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I remember that like dawned on me. I was like, what year did this come out? I was like, wait, Colt didn't come out for like a year or two after. Like, that's crazy. So it's kind of funny to kind of see like the writing on the wall before it actually happened. So, and like having your homies like repping Colt before it was bikes.
Yeah.
So where did it go from there? Like what was the progression from it being like this project for you that was going to be something then turning into a brand?
It happened a lot quicker than I thought it would. That's for sure. As far as turning into a brand, but essentially the Robbie was leaving Fit and was he and Chase Hawk have always been close. Like they've always kind of talked, and I guess he was talking to Chase and sort of maybe asked him to come with him, asked him if he was interested, and Chase was like, yeah, for sure, you're one of my boys, like I'm down. And they were throwing names around, and Chase suggested, he's like, well, Adam's been doing this thing called Colt. What if we turn that into the brand? And Robbie he's like, yeah, I'm down. Basically, from there, we kind of just started Colt. That's how I'll go about that. Yeah,
that's totally fair.
It was kind of shopped around a little bit, and there were some other people that were maybe going to get involved, but they didn't. And there was some gray area about how it was all going down, and I was so young and sort of kept like to the side, so I don't know exactly how it all came together, but that's from my knowledge how.
Interesting. So a lot of layers to it.
Yeah.
What age were you at that point in time?
It was 2010, is that right?
Yeah, so I think that's right around then.
I would have been 25.
Okay. And you'd never like you dealt with anything on that level before,
No,
right?
not at
Yeah.
all,
So like
no.
going into something like that where you're like, hey, this is my intellectual property. Like I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, because I would assume now like the conversation would probably be a little different since you've gone down the road so
Yeah.
far and like you have been through it. So
Yeah.
that's crazy. So like where did it go? Like once Colt was like inked to be a bike company, were you brought on as like an employee? Were you brought on as like 1099 worker? Or?
Not originally. The details, I don't want to say anything incorrect, so it's hard for me to remember specifics, but I believe I was not getting paid in the beginning. I got sent like an old laptop and like
Just like sweat
some
equity
clothes.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And then maybe a few months into it, my recollection is that I basically was like, I can't keep doing this for free. This is so much work. I need to start getting paid. Can you help me out? And then I did start getting paid at that point. And I was paid like a monthly salary, essentially like a rider on the team. And that went on for a long time. My pay fluctuated like a little bit here and there, but I mean, it's basically the same the whole way. My responsibilities became more and more and more over time, for sure.
Heck yeah. Yeah, because you kind of grew into that like art director role, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, I mean, it's so hard with any business, but especially like BMX, like those early years, like money is so scarce. So like, yeah, they're like, I have to work for free kind of thing. It's
Yep.
like, that's a hard thing to do, man,
It
especially
is.
when you're like a hungry mid-20-year-old, just like, dude, this is a lot. Like
Yeah.
Austin is not cheap.
Yeah.
So Yeah, that's crazy. So you did that for nearly a decade, right?
Yeah, I think it was 9 years, maybe 9.5 years, something like that.
Heck yeah. Did you have any like favorite projects that you worked on while you were doing cult stuff? I know that there was like a ton of really big collaborations along the way. Were you directing that art, like working with other companies during that stuff?
My favorite project was the Simpsons bike project that we did for sure.
And that was obviously like with people from The Simpsons, I
Yeah,
would assume, because like
so
all copyrighted. And
yeah,
all that.
yeah. Like Mark Groening like personally signs off on all of it. Actually,
Wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, we were at Agenda Trade Show, which I don't know if that's even still around anymore, but it was skateboarding and streetwear, which was a new pairing at the time. And I mean, to my knowledge, and in a trade show, and then they added a small BMX component and invited Robbie and Cole to come, and Robbie had me come out there with him, and we're in the booth, and I was wearing a bootleg Simpsons t-shirt, and two people like normie looking folks like walk up with their like tote bags, and they're like, "Hey, you like the Simpsons?" And I'm like, "I love the Simpsons." They're like, "Oh, well, we work for 20th Century Fox. Would you guys be interested in doing a collaboration?" I'm like, yeah,
No way.
let's do it. So that's how it all started. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So were you kind of like working with the people in their studio to like create the project? Or?
Yeah. So it was very complicated. I had to take a course in the middle of the night with these girls from Tilly's. They were in Bali doing product purchasing, but we had to learn how to use the 20th Century Fox database of artwork and submissions. It was like this weird antiquated operating.
It's like old school, like
weird
Windows 95
yes,
looking.
it was weird. And so once I learned, which I could have figured out myself anyway, honestly, but once I learned that, I was able to access all of their artwork that they had. I pulled that all onto my computer and just started putting mock-ups together. And then I would meet on the phone with this lady who was in charge of marketing for 20th Century Fox, and also a guy whose name was Dave Swift, who had been an animator on The Simpsons and then had moved to just the marketing department. So he had drawn like tons of Simpsons episodes, and so he was like technically like a Simpsons animator.
Wow.
And he would take all of my mock-ups and turn them into like sketches and ideas and send them back, and then we kind of went back and forth on a few things.
Dang, that's super cool.
It was really cool.
What a process.
Yeah.
Like to work with like a powerhouse like that too,
Yeah.
and like how like realistically like corporate and like how much red tape there is to like make that happen. And
It was kind of a nightmare, to be honest with you.
I
but
bet,
it was cool when it all came together.
I'm sure that was like probably somewhat of a relief too when they finally signed off on that end project. And then
there was lots of pushback. I really wanted to make Bart's bike. Like I wanted to make a version of what Bart Simpson's bike would look like, and I could not convince them that was a good idea for whatever reason.
interesting.
Yeah, it was like the most frustrating part of it.
That's crazy. Yeah, I feel like it's so hard to get people who like really have no perspective of what BMX is or like why something would be cool.
Yeah.
Like to get on that same level. So you kind of have to like sell them like a super crazy idea and like slide in something that's like crazy but a little less crazy, you know? Huh, that's super cool. So kind of talking about like stepping away from like the cult thing, like was there a specific reason that you kind of were like, you know, was it a mutual thing where you just like, I need to go? Because you had already started Burn Slow, correct?
Yeah. My paycheck stopped coming without any notice. So that's what happened straight up. Yeah.
Wow.
And then once that happened, it just all fell apart from there. But there's a lot of communication issues, and you know, it's out of my hands because I'm not at the top and I'm not the one controlling things. So I mean, there's only so much I could do.
Yeah, it's hard when, you know, communication is like lacking, and like that's the number one reason anything kind of goes south anyways, right?
1000%.
Like bad communication.
Yep.
And you know, it can be on one side or both ends, but it's so freaking
matter,
hard. It's so hard, and once it gets bad, it's hard to remedy.
Yep.
You know, so when that kind of transition happened, was it like a hard thing for you to kind of let go, or were you kind of already past the point of like, okay, I'm like moving on to my own thing?
I was over it, I would say, at that point.
There was no like mourning going on. You kind of already accepted it.
Yeah, I mean, it was my baby at one point, but kind of what we touched on earlier, I have a certain vision for how it should be, and the people running it have a different vision, and that it was a lot of butting heads over that over the years. And what would happen is we would butt heads and sort of grow apart, and it would get to a point where it was like so frustrating, and that someone would blow up, and then it would kind of get hashed out, kind of, I would say, and then the same process would happen. It was just this like never-ending cycle.
Yeah, that's hard when it's like those hard ebbs and flows where it's just like clashing and then you're friends again. So moving on, you have Burn Slow at this point in time. Where did the idea for Burn Slow come from?
I mean, I've always, even when I started Cult, it was always this idea that I've had that I wanted to sort of have my own brand, I guess. Like, really the brand is a means to an end, which is me just being able to make things. Mm-hmm. That's really all I want to do.
Just to be in a space to create.
Yes. I just want to like make stuff. That's it. That's the thing that makes me happy, that helps me feel the best and feel like I'm contributing and all those sorts of things. So that is always, I guess, how I've seen, like I said, a means to an end to get there. And so Cult, the idea originally with Cult was I'm going to start this brand, and it'll be a venue for me to create things and put them out. And then it turned into a business, and it turned into, not what I wanted it to be or how I saw it working. And so at a certain point I said, I'm going to do this myself. Like, I need to, I've been doing this for long enough. I've kind of set these guys up, shown them how to do it. I can kind of still help quarterback this, but I've also got the bandwidth to now start taking on my own thing and making my own decisions without having to explain every single thing that I do and why I'm doing it. And
that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're a creative type, where it's like, the older I get, I'm starting to learn it's really hard to explain. Like, when you have a vision, it's very hard to like put that into words.
It's draining, and it is a skill all in and of itself.
100%.
And I've learned that over the years, that it's like you have to present a certain way, and it has to appeal a certain way. But yeah, it's draining. And now at Burn Slow, I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And I know all of these things already. And if someone comes to me and says like, why are you doing this? I can say exactly why, for X or Y reasons. But I don't have to defend every single piece and like give the rundown of why this is what we should do. And it's a huge relief.
That's super cool. Yeah. I'm sure that is such like a weight off the shoulders, where you're like, cool. Like, instead of, kind of like the red tape of like, okay, this is the process of how we're going to like pitch an idea, you can just like run towards the goal at the end of the day, and you can say, this, we're going to create this is why we're creating it, let's go.
Yeah.
And you can like activate all of your people who are around you to like jump on that. Yeah. Like, I thought it was really cool the other day after we did Aaron's podcast and you guys were setting up for the photos, and just seeing like how kind of everybody was working together and like maneuvering around each other. And it's like, that's a talent in and of itself too, to be able to like wrangle people and like put them in the same room. And like, just even seeing like the trips you guys are putting together and like the content that you guys are putting out, that's a hard thing to do.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, man. And like, yeah, I guess like for me, like looking in from the outside, it's like Burn Slow Entertainment Company. Like, the name of that is, are you trying to be more of like a marketing company that sells apparel, or just kind of like a broad spectrum thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sell apparel. I don't want to be a business. It is like the most broad, like, I want to make entertaining products.
Yeah.
So that's where the name comes from, really, like the entertainment part of it, essentially. So yeah, I would love to like make a full-length feature film at some point, you know, like maybe that will be one of our big projects at a certain point.
Heck yeah.
But it can be anything, really. Yeah.
I love that. So who's helping you right now with making the dream come true?
So Tina and Tom at Empire are invested financially. Chase Hawk, Aaron Ross, and Devin Hutchins are also invested. And they all help me with weird different stuff. Chase and Aaron are mostly help with marketing and sort of I run ideas through everyone and they give me good feedback and all that kind of stuff. And they bring the names obviously also, which is huge.
Yep.
Devin does our photography and our video, most of our video stuff.
And he kills it.
He's amazing.
Absolutely kills it.
Yeah. Devin and I have known each other since we were 13 or 14 probably.
Wow.
So yeah, like 99, something.
So you
like
guys
that.
grew up like riding together and everything
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And have you guys been like pretty close through this whole time?
Yeah, he went away to college for a while and moved to LA for a little bit at separate times, but yeah, we've always maintained a good friendship. This company, like us doing Burn Slow, has made all of us tighter again, which is like one of the best like byproducts of the whole thing. Like we've got a group chat that's like one of my most active group chats, and I mean we were always good friends and really close, but when you don't, everyone's so busy, and so when you don't necessarily have like a business tie or whatever it may be, it's hard to maintain those kinds of relationships. But we have this thing that we all have together and that we talk about, and it's been like,
That's super
awesome.
cool. Like it almost turns into family.
Yeah,
you know? It's
absolutely.
like,
Yeah,
it is family. It's
we've
like
been family,
a true
for
community,
sure.
you know, and like
yeah.
that's, I think, you know, again, looking in from the outside, it's so cool to see like that community that you guys have built so quickly. Cause like in reality, what are you guys, almost 3 years old now?
We'll be 3 in February, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have anything big planned for that?
We've got not for that, but we've got a pretty big collaboration, for fall of next year. That's
Heck yeah.
pretty exciting.
I'm looking forward to seeing what that is, dude.
I'll tell you off air.
Oh, the secret sauce, man. So like, you know, you guys are almost 3 years into this. What is something along the way so far that you guys have encountered with the venture that you like didn't really expect?
We're being extorted by our Airbnb host for $3,000.
Oh man, that guy needs to kick rocks, dude.
Yeah.
Not chill.
No, super not.
Is
chill.
that like the worst thing that's happened so far?
Yeah.
Or most challenging, I guess I should say.
I mean, that is whatever. We'll figure it out. I'll just cancel my credit card and tell them to buzz off.
I love it, dude.
Yeah.
Get creative with it.
Yeah. I mean, the first release that we did, I like made myself sick putting it all together. We had a grand a release party or whatever, and I was so worn out and sick that I just sat in the corner, like couldn't even stand the whole time. That was probably like the hardest.
Just from the stress of like putting it all together.
Yeah, and I just wanted it to hit so hard and so perfectly that the first, and like looking back, it's like it doesn't matter like that, and that's one of those where I've like, you know, I've grown from that even just 2 years ago or whatever. Where I'm like, it doesn't matter, it's fine.
Well, I'm sure there was a lot of stress too from like the whole cult thing as well, like as you were going into that, like.
Yeah, that was going on, but it wasn't public, but it was like, I can't remember what stages it was at that point, but that was there were some, we'll say negotiations going on behind the scenes for about a year with that. So that was hanging over my head for sure.
And you're like working on trying to like build this super cool thing, and you're just like, dude, fuck.
Yeah.
That's a lot, dude.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, again, from the outsider's perspective, like I remember when that launch happened, and like I'm kind of the same way as you, where it's like I'm tapped into the things that I like in BMX, but like outside of that, like I'm pretty well removed. And I remember seeing that, and I text my buddy Matt Cordova, and I was like, do you know anything about this? This is like super freaking rad. And like, yeah, it was cool like seeing what that was and immediately just being drawn to it. And again, I'll just go back to it for like the fourth time. Like I didn't even realize like why I was, but like continuously again and again, it's like you're the dude behind it. And like the style was just like, whoa, it's so like unique and like there's again soul to it. So
thank you, I appreciate that.
that's super cool, dude. It's like it's awesome also to see like a writer owned thing that's like I see people wearing it all the time. And like every time I wear like Burn Slow stuff, like especially we're in Colorado, so like anytime I wear like a Burn Slow hat into like a dispensary or something, they're like, dude, that's so cool. So like speaking on that, I guess like where did the name come from? Like where did that idea for that come from?
I don't remember specifically. So the way I put the name together is I have a notebook that I draw and write in a lot. And I just kind of went through there and was looking at stuff, and I had a list of maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 ideas. And from there, I just kind of started drawing some logos, and the logos came with that combination of words came together very easily. I had already had some weird globes like burning in my notebook also, and I kind of put those two together pretty easily. And at the time I was feeling like extreme burnout from doing Cult, and so it sort of fit. It was like I want this project that doesn't the process at Cult was like there was never time to celebrate our accomplishments. It was just
Next thing.
This is due today. Like it's like, oh well, the thing that was due yesterday, we just like, and so yeah, it was about building something where I could go at a slow but steady and like a marching pace that I would like to do, and that would feel comfortable for me, and that would allow to sort of celebrate our small accomplishments. And yeah, like you like drain all of like the value out of everything. I felt like a lot was being left on the table, and that was contributing to my burnout also. It's just like keep going, more new, more and it's like, well, there's still a lot left with what we just did that we can extract more from in a way.
Yeah, because I can completely see what you're saying with that, because like from the beginning, like I just loved like the approach that Cult had, where it like came in and it was kind of like the 2 middle fingers up and like we're gonna run this shit. But there were so many campaigns along the way that it was like, damn, that's really cool. And then like you're saying, like next quarter or next month or whatever it would be, there's a new t-shirt, new thing coming out, and it's like, okay, well now I don't really understand like what that was, like the move over or we'll move over you, like those kind of things. Like they're so bold, the statements are so hard, but then like there's no real explanation behind it. And I guess that's probably coming from the fact that you're not celebrating the small wins. You're just like just trying to produce. And like I'm the kind of person who does appreciate the quality over quantity and like some sort of like a reasoning behind it. Like, yeah. So that's really cool that that's like kind of the focus, or that is the focus that you guys are putting into Burn Slow, and like trying to be a little more methodical about like the drops. And you guys are doing these really cool like is it quarterly that you guys are doing stuff?
Yep.
And I love that, like these capsules of stuff that are like themed off of something, and like the videos that come along with that. I think that that's so forward thinking, it's like fashion lines, it's like that's really cool. And again, I think that kind of goes beyond what the BMX thing is, and it's like, hey, people out here, like you might be interested in this.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. So anything, I know you've kind of alluded to a little bit of a collaboration that's coming along that sounds like it's going to be pretty dope coming fall. Anything else you guys are working on kind of at the moment that's coming soon that you'd like to allude to? I know you guys just put out the second part of your winter drop. Yeah,
we just this morning, yesterday, I don't remember. It's been crazy. Yeah, it was this morning. We got the second round of winter. Basically now we kind of have some tentative plans, but I wouldn't really like to speak on them because they're so tentative.
Yeah.
But, so we have some irons in the fire, as they would say. The plan is to take a trip probably out west sometime in February, I think. And then we'd like to go to Bentonville. Aaron's got a house there, and they've got the whole trail scene. So I think we'd like to try and do a BMX trip there to see how that would go. And then we've talked about a trip to the East Coast to film for our collaboration. We are something I'm excited about, which I can't elaborate on a ton, but we're working on some cool marketing stuff for this collaboration where we're going to build, the goal is to build like 100 times size model of this product that we're collaborating on.
That sounds like Aaron Ross had some influence in that.
We'll see.
Because he was in his podcast, he talked about all the crazy things he's built along the years, and like he was like, everybody always like tried to talk me down from it. And, like, we can build one and we can Photoshop them. So now I'm even more intrigued. So I think it's really cool. Like, you know, you talked about the people that help make the dream come true, but I also think it's really cool, like the team of dudes that you have that you support through Burn Slow. Is that something where people are reaching out to you and you're like, oh, you're a sick rider? Or is it people that, you know, that are people that are local to Austin? Or like, how does that work for you guys?
It's through friends. It's people that we have relationships with and that we think are cool, that we think collectively as a group, we all talk about it. Myself, Aaron, Chase, and Devin. And we do get requests. I check every single DM, and we do get requests for, hey, would you sponsor me or check out my page? And I always tell people we don't really have a team, but we support people on sort of a project by project basis. And but someone like Brett Silva is like just the easiest, coolest dude to work, like one of the best people ever to work with. And so it's just, and he comes to us because he knows that we're down to support what he has in mind and vice versa. So like, yeah, we just kind of keep consistently working together. But that's, it is what you're saying, where it's like these people are our friends and they're such good people that it just naturally comes together in that way. Like the things weed themselves out, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. So if there was like a piece of advice that you could give a kid that's looking to like get hooked up, maybe not by just you guys,
sure,
but just kind of in the industry, like what would it be, I guess?
Be a cool person.
Heck yeah.
Just be a cool person. Like there are people that are not great at bike riding that are cool people that get really far. So
100%.
And there are people that are really good at bike riding that are not cool people, and they don't get anything. They don't last long. So
yeah, I feel like that's something like now as a business owner myself, like growing up, I never understood that. I remember sending all the emails to people and getting the responses like exactly what you're talking about. And now being on the other side of that, where we're getting those emails and like, oh, like relationships are so important,
mm-hmm,
and like showing up to the things are so important.
Get involved in your community.
Yeah.
That's those two things. Be involved and be cool, and you'll go far, honestly.
Totally. And like, if like, for example, if somebody wants to work with you, it's like show up to your events, like buy a cheap plane ticket and show up, slap fives, and like make people know your face, right? Like that goes so far, man.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
I never understood that as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's cool that that's kind of the way you guys operate as well. I feel like that's kind of how it has to be done if it's a genuine business.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree.
Heck yeah, man. So, we talked about from the beginning through Colt to Burn Slow now. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the sacrifices involved to make these things happen. This podcast is really centered around like, we have to make sacrifices to do the things that we're really excited about. So what is like one of the most important lessons you've learned throughout the career, if there is one that comes to the top of your head?
I would say it's that's hard to pinpoint one thing. Yeah, that's a difficult question for me to answer, to be honest with you.
Heck yeah.
There are so many different things I have learned, and what I would say actually is to learn your lessons. That's it, is to if something bad happens to you, to try and take it in stride as best as possible, and to not let that happen, learn from it, so that it's avoidable in the future. That's probably it, really.
That's
to
incredible.
be honest with
Yeah, I
you.
mean, that's profound advice for a lot of people, you know? It's like, it's hard to like step back and kind of like dissect why something bad happened and then say like, okay, X, Y, and Z caused this. How can I prevent that from happening
Yep.
again? So yeah, thank you for that. That's incredible, man.
Yeah.
So we all know like being a creative is hard and incredibly stressful work. You know, it's
Not for me.
not for you.
Just kidding.
one bad dude right here. You know, I mean, it is one of those things where it's like you hear so many times like, oh, you're a struggling artist, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know it requires a lot of sacrifice. Like, is there anything that comes to you like that you had to sacrifice to create the life that you have?
No, I mean, I've been down, but like any sort of early 20-year-old, I think.
Well, I guess you kind of touched on it too with like you're working retail and you hated that.
Yeah,
and you're working
that
at
was
Zumiez.
probably
that's a big sacrifice, you know. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I have the skill set to where I could probably work a job in a corporate environment and make a lot more money than I'm making now. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest one. But given my personality and how I'd like to live my life, it would be terrible. It's not a sacrifice. This is for me like so worth it. Like not making what I could potentially be making, but I get to wake up whenever I want. I get to make whatever shirt I want to make. I get to do whatever I want kind of at any time for the most part within reason. So yeah, it's totally worth it.
There's a lot of beauty in that. And I was just talking to Joe Rich when we were downstairs before I walked up here, and we were talking about like the beauty of creating your own business or being a creative is that you get to create your own utopia. Is that kind of how you feel about now working on Burn Slow?
Yeah, I don't know. Running a business is not my utopia, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I hate business so much. I don't want to like sell things, but I love coming and sitting in this office. This office is so sick. Like Tina and Tom are the best. They allow me to have this space here at Empire. I wouldn't change anything for anything, honestly. And so I guess I don't think of it in terms of sacrifice. I don't know if I necessarily have considered it that way, but there are probably even more. Honestly.
That's fair. We had a guest on 2 weeks ago, I believe now, and at the end of his episode, he said like, I don't believe in sacrifice, I believe in choices. And I was like, that's a really great way to think about that.
Yeah, I like that too.
And I was like, that's kind of exactly what you're describing. You've made a lot of choices to end up at the point that you're at.
And I'm comfortable with all of them, I think. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, learning from the failures and like moving forward. Is there any failures that really jump out to you that you're like, that was a defining moment for me to like change course or anything like that?
Probably moving to San Francisco when I was, 18 years old or whatever. That was probably the biggest bungle of my life and really set me back. And kind of what we talked about, having to work construction and then retail at the mall, was like pulling myself out of like a hole that I had dug in a way. So that probably kind of aligns with what you're saying, I think.
Yeah. So as we kind of move into wrapping this up, for people who might be listening who are saying like, yeah, I like to be creative. I want to do exactly what this guy's talking about. Like I want to create. What direction would you point somebody in to do that? Like if there's some piece of profound advice that you can give them.
I mean, do whatever makes you happy. That's what I do. I pull out my notebook and I start drawing and it makes me happy. I see this is not good. This is terrible, like not great advice. I would say figure out what works for you and focus on that, hone those skills. There's probably not one single piece of advice. It's really sort of depends on your situation and your scenario. But again, I think it comes back to get involved in your community, put yourself out there and be a cool person. I think if you like, Colt was a zine. Anybody can do that. Anybody can make a zine. That's my advice right there. You can make a zine. You can start a brand. You don't have to make the biggest, best thing to start out with. Make the smallest, worst thing first. Learn from that. Make something a little bit bigger and a little bit more polished from there, and just keep building on those blocks and do all that other stuff. You'll be good to go.
That's amazing. It is great, dude. I mean, it's true, though, because, you know, especially living in the digital age that we do, it's so easy to get on Instagram and look at like how hard people are killing it, or how hard it looks like they're killing it.
Exactly, yes.
And for the person who's just getting started, it's like, dude, that's unattainable.
Yeah.
But in reality, exactly what you're describing is like those people are just people.
Yep.
And like you and I, they had to start from zero.
Yep.
You know, and that's so great. You described it so eloquently there. So I love that, man. This is a question that I always like to ask on these podcasts. One of my co-hosts who's not here, he started this one. So you grew up in the age of MySpace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a MySpace?
I did, yes.
Heck yeah. So we always like to ask people, what was the most iconic MySpace song you had, if you can remember?
I can't remember.
If you think about yourself in that era, what do you think it
probably
would have been?
Poison the Well or Thursday, something along those lines.
Hell yeah. And today, if you could start a MySpace page right now, what would your song be at this moment?
Wow, that's a tough one. Probably Hatebreed Before Dishonor, because I've just been listening to it on repeat for the last couple weeks for sure.
That's amazing.
Since we just put out all this Hatebreed stuff.
Dude, that's awesome. That's a good one too.
Oh yeah.
Do you find yourself going through songs like that where you're just putting them on repeat until you like burn them out?
Oh, absolutely. I'm terrible about that.
I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that does that, because I'll like stumble across something. I'm like, dude, this is so good. I can't find another song like this. I want to just listen to this.
I make a playlist of like 10 or 15 of those, and I will just murder them until I can't hear it anymore.
Yep. And then it comes on like 6 months later, and you're just like, oh, why is that? Why do I still have that saved?
Exactly.
Heck yeah, dude. And finally, last but not least, if you could go back and give your 18-year-old self any piece of advice, what would it be?
Just keep doing what you're doing, bud. That's it. I mean, it's all working out so far, so.
That's amazing, man. Well, this has been a treat, dude.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, dude. This is awesome. And for anybody listening, please, please, please go to 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙈𝘼𝑇 website right now.
Yes.
Grab yourself a t-shirt.
Buy one of these shirts, please.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see some of the beautiful t-shirts. You need one. Or a hat.
Yeah.
Or something
Beanie,
cool.
We got swim shorts.
They just dropped all kinds of new dope shit, so... And I guess before we wrap it up, we did a Traction 𝙎𝘾𝘼𝙍𝙀 collaboration.
Yeah, we did. There you go.
But is that something you'd ever be interested in doing again?
Let's
I know
do it
we're
again.
on air, but
yeah, let's do it again.
We've had so much fun with that. People always are hitting us up like, do you have any more of those shirts? So
sorry, all gone.
Sold out, man. One and done.
There you go.
That'd be sick to do again.
Let's do it again.
Well, heck yeah, man. I appreciate the beverage. I appreciate the conversation. And yeah, I'll let you get back to it.
Thanks, bud.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. Keep being scared of normal. Later.